Hello and welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethany.
And we're the Youngs.
Welcome.
Hey, we're glad to have you again on the podcast this week, and hope you're enjoying our series for our single friends. Mm-hmm. And if you know someone who's single, I hope you'll be sharing this and encouraging them to tune in and listen. And all of you single folks that are listening, I hope you'll reach out to us. Let us know what you think and what you think we could have added. If you disagree with us, let us know that too. Be kind.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you. And also any other ideas that you might have or questions that you have that we might be able to make into another episode. That would be good.
That would be great, absolutely.
Yes.
And so just a couple of things here to remind you of. We still have some openings for our couples conference, the Couples Prayer Advance in Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge,
yes.
And we actually were up in that area just recently and drove by the venue. It looks really nice. It's going to be really, really nice place.
Yes.
And we hope many of you will come join us. It's going to be a beautiful time of the year because it is fall and because the colors will be on and all of that. It is a busy time.
Yes, so that's true.
If you're still out there debating on whether or not to come, decide yes very soon and come join us. And you can go to the keepingityoungpodcast.com. And you'll find the link to sign up and everything right there on the top of the page.
We would love to see you.
Yes. And, sometimes people are not as familiar with podcasting, don't know how to find them. And so if you have friends or whatever that you think this would be a help to, what we're sharing, just let people know that you can listen to all of our podcasts on the Keeping It Young podcast website.
Right.
And they're right there. They're available. And sometimes you get questions from people about, we're really struggling about this. And we have a whole list of all the topics we've covered, and if we can help direct you, maybe someone, you'd like to give it a help to them,
yes.
And we can point you to the ones we've recorded and that are available by topic.
Right.
And so if we can help you in that way, let us know. We'd be happy to do it.
I've even had, sometimes people will say, well, I don't have Spotify because my podcaster or podcatcher, whatever you call it, that I listen to my podcast on is on Spotify. And they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have Spotify, so I can't listen to it. And so I usually ask them, okay, well, what is the app that you use to listen to music or listen to other podcasts? And they'll let me know. And then I help them find the Keeping It Young podcast. And they're always like, oh my goodness, there it is right there. I've never seen that before. So help
Absolutely.
Your friends maybe to find it.
So if you have any podcasts, pretty much you can find Keeping It Young on there, on any podcast app. So check that out. Are we ready to jump in today and get going?
I think so. Do we need to do a little review of where we've been?
Yes, I think maybe we should, in case you're joining us for the first time. We're in the middle of a series here that we are calling it Wisdom or Thoughts for Our Single Friends.
Yes.
And we have so many singles that we meet on the road in almost every church.
Yes.
And all the time, singles will say, hey, we listen to your podcast. And
which is awesome.
It is. We were so thrilled about that. And we even have some parents who will reach out and say, hey, our single daughter, our single son, my son, my daughter listens to your podcast.
Yes.
And so we thought, we should just do a series just for, specifically devoted to our single friends. That's where this came from. And we started, if you were with us 2 episodes ago, on how do you make singleness something very good.
Yes.
And we talked our way through there about how making it a time of spiritual ministry and making it a time to build your life. Any particular review there you think we ought to hit on?
Well, just making it a time where you can enjoy it and you're not focused on, oh, I want to be married, but I'm just living and loving life and serving God, and everything is good, and I am content.
Absolutely. And then we talked last week about how do you find a spouse in a world like ours? Mm-hmm. And we were going over some pretty practical things there. We talked about guarding against worldly philosophies. That was a tricky one.
It was. And sometimes I think I got a little tongue-tied last week because I was trying to compare cultural feminism with biblical femininity, and it wasn't coming out. And also, you just kind of feel like in today's world, you have to tiptoe around there. So I was like,
we could have probably
we could
have taken that out and redid it, but it was just beautiful to leave it in.
Thank you.
It made me smile when I listened to it. So we talked about even materialism and things of that sort. So all of that was last week, and a place to look for wisdom and advice. And then we, just kind of closed out there with some practical things.
Right.
And just thought, through some real practical, even that we close with that observing the one you're interested in various situations.
Yes.
And that's always a fun one.
It's a good thing
I
to
love
do.
the first one. And if you remember, we have told you that a lot of what we're teaching here, we were influenced by Alistair Begg.
Yes.
And we were researching. When I decided to do something for singles, I was looking through all kinds of books and just, seeing what others had to say. Mm-hmm. And I thought Pastor Begg's information was practical, was simple, was very biblical.
Yes.
And I thought some of the most helpful stuff in the world.
Well, and it's actually a book about marriage.
It is.
Right?
Yeah, and
but the first few chapters are on singleness and how to navigate that time.
Absolutely. And so if you have never read any of his writings, his book, Lasting Love, would cover a lot of the stuff we're talking here about in great detail. Mm-hmm. And so, those first 3 chapters would be great. In fact, our son came in the other night, and he's in a dating relationship.
Yes.
And he was just asking questions. It was late at night, but he sat in our room and talked with us for some time. And so he said, well, what could I read? And I handed him that book, and I said, read these first 3 chapters, or the whole book if you'd like. It's all a wealth of information.
Yes.
But those early chapters are really great. So we ready to jump into today's?
We are. And if you've missed the first 2 episodes in this series, just go back and listen to them, and it'll kind of cue into where we are today. But today we're going to be giving some practical advice individually to guys and girls.
Yes, and that's going to be exciting. I do have to add that one of my favorite things last week was about when we talked about observing the friend in various situations, observing them driving in congestion. That still just was one of my favorite things.
Do they have road rage, or do they cause you to have road rage? Sometimes, the person that's driving, you're like, wow, they get really uptight in traffic. Or it could be that they just float along and they're okay with everything, and you're sitting in the passenger seat like, you could be a little more aggressive here.
And none of those, none in that list last week is a you have to stay away from this person. That's a closed door.
Right.
And I was just even thinking about one of the things we used to joke about before your mom went to heaven was her driving, because she was always very aggressive.
She was an aggressive driver.
Was always like, I cannot believe these people. And it's one of my favorite memories of her was how uptight she would get in driving. But she and Dad had a wonderful marriage. So my point there being, it's not the end of the world. It's just that it's helping you to get to know a person in real life situations.
Yes.
Because that's how they will be.
Right.
So today we're going to jump in and we're going to just talk to you guys, you single guys for a few moments, and then you single girls.
Yes.
And basically the question we're going to address is, how do you evaluate? So you meet a guy or you meet a girl and you're thinking, all right, this is I really like him, I really like her. Mm-hmm. How can you practically evaluate this relationship to say, is this a relationship that I could consider as potential marriage?
Right.
And so what we're really talking about here in this session is, how do you find a spouse? In this podcast, how do you find a spouse in a world like ours?
Right. And I would say this doesn't mean that every person that you meet, you're going to run through this checklist in your mind and be like, oh, are they a potential mate? We just mean that, one of those times you're in a group and you're thinking, wow, I really am interested in that person over there across the table, maybe 5 people down from me or whatever. I find her attractive to look at, or I think he's funny, or wonderful to talk to, interesting.
And say it. He's ruggedly handsome.
There we go. This would be something that maybe you would, this checklist you would go through at that point, not just something that you go through every single friend that you meet, because then that makes you an awkward person to meet.
That probably would be true. I was even thinking, in light of these, when I put these in, that when a person begins to build a friendship.
There we go.
So when you're in a friendship relationship and you're thinking, should this friendship go deeper? Should this friendship start heading towards a closer relationship, maybe even marriage?
Yes.
This might be the place to bring these questions. Not to every guy you meet, not to every girl you meet, but in a friendship relationship that could lead toward marriage.
Right.
So let's jump in with the guys.
All right.
What's the first? There's 6 of them. What's the first one?
The first one is, does she have a personal faith and trust in Jesus?
Now that ought to be a given.
It should be.
But one of the things I've noticed in all the books that I've read, that many pastors, one of the frustrations of their pastoring singles is that sometimes singles feel that this is not that big of a deal. They tend to think in terms of, well, I know she really isn't saved, or she doesn't know Jesus, or, she says she does, but she never goes to church. She doesn't really have a faith, but that'll change when we get married. We'll work on that. She's just so fun and everything else is so great. But really, Paul makes this when Paul writes to the church at Corinth, married people and single people.
Yes.
And he talks to both of them together and separately. One of the things he's very clear about is that one of the first things you have to evaluate in any relationship is this person a strong believer? Does this person share my faith?
Right.
And the Bible warns us about the fact that when we have a relationship, when you commit in a marriage relationship and you have different views on faith, when you have different views on Christianity, one is a believer, one is an unbeliever, the Bible does refer to that in the King James Version as unequally yoked together.
Right.
So what ends up happening is you're pulling in two different directions, and you have two different philosophies, you have two different worldviews.
Yes.
And that is one of the biggest things that should be a red flag. If you're interested in a young lady, but she does not have a personal faith and trust in Jesus, and this is beyond just saying so. Oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. When what we mean by this is her faith and trust in Jesus real and evident by her works.
Yes.
Can you see she doesn't just say that she got, I got saved when I was 3, I got saved when I was 9, I got saved at VBS. The question is this real? Can you look at this person and say, there's a person that really does believe in Jesus? And the reason it's so important is because of the fact that it will damage your relationship when the two of you become one in a marriage. But it will also, when this is not true, will damage the raising of your children in the years to come.
Absolutely.
So this is a big one.
And we have counseled enough to know that there is great heartache in a marriage relationship where one is a believer and one is not a believer.
Yes.
It can cause a great deal of heartache, and you will save yourself a lot of that if you are careful about this in the dating relationship.
Sure. So here's the second one then. Does she have beauty that is deeper than the skin? And I love this one because, the idea is that everybody marries someone they're physically attracted to.
I should hope so.
I would think so, wouldn't you?
Right.
That would seem to make sense. But the fact of the matter is that we also know that real beauty, we don't just marry a body. We don't just marry a look. Okay, she's pretty, so I'll marry her.
Right.
People, we fall in love with people, and a person is the whole makeup. It's their personality, it's their spirit, it's their attitude.
Yes.
It's an entire person is more than just what they look like outwardly.
Absolutely. Their intellect, their emotions, everything.
And one of the things that, maybe can help us to see that is sometimes we'll see, people will see a couple, and the question is like, well, okay, how did he get her? Or how did she get him? But it's because beauty is always deeper than the skin.
Yes.
And by that, what do you think we mean here? How would you explain to our audience what is beauty that is deeper than the skin? That's the question. What do we mean by that?
Well, they sometimes would say beauty is more than skin deep, but ugly goes to the bone. And so sometimes you can find a pretty girl, but when she opens her mouth or when something comes into her life that causes her to be a little agitated or she has a bad hair day, the beauty that is on the outside does nothing to cover up the ugly that comes from the inside. And so she is either not walking with the Lord and able to bring forth the fruit of the Spirit in her life, or she's just been trained that it's okay to be sassy and harsh and selfish. So I know sometimes when we were traveling in evangelism with all 3 of our boys, we would go into a meeting and there would always be teen girls everywhere. And of course, our boys notice pretty girls. They do. And sometimes I would see a pretty little teen girl maybe singing in the choir. And I would mention her later to the boys. I would say, oh, did you see that little girl up in the choir? Do you think she was pretty? And the boys would say something like, Mom, I've seen her all week, but she hasn't smiled one time. I don't think she's attractive at all. And that really was maybe just a notification to me that our boys found a sweet spirit more attractive than just the hair and the makeup and the way her face was put together by God. They wanted a sweet-spirited girl, and all of our girls, or our boys, I'm sorry, have found sweet-spirited girls that are beautiful, but more than just beautiful on the outside.
So if we were to detail it, we would say that beauty is outward appearance. So it's the way you look.
Yes.
But then we would add two more to that, and we would also say it's the spirit you show.
Yes.
So that if you're always uptight and bothered and on edge and sarcastic and rude and you don't get your way and you throw, as we used to say, a hissy fit.
Right.
Not sure what that is, but it always was used.
Yes.
So it's the spirit we show, but it's also the words we say. And Solomon talks a lot about one of the ways a man can evaluate a lady is in her words. And I've often noticed in the Song of Solomon, he compliments the way she talks. And he mentions her words, the words of her mouth. And so the three things you'd be looking for there, guys, to find out is beauty deeper than the skin. It's great to be attracted, so you're not having, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
It's a good thing to be attracted and say, oh, my word, she's so, gorgeous and beautiful. But real beauty involves two other things as well. It's the words she says. Is she kind? Is she gracious? Is she thankful? Is she thoughtful?
Right.
Is she encouraging? Is she sweet? But it's also the spirit she shows.
Absolutely.
And anything else to that?
I would say in our culture, it's very popular right now to label yourself. And so labels, sometimes they say in our culture, they don't matter at all, but then they have all these labels.
Sure.
And one of the most popular ones right now are you an extrovert or are you an introvert? And I know sometimes, gentlemen, you can excuse things, or you might excuse a girl, or she might excuse herself by saying, well, I'm just an introvert, and that's why I don't smile, and that's why I don't talk to people. And you should be very careful about that, because I have met some young ladies who can be very open and friendly when they're in their tiny little friend group, and then all of a sudden become sullen and unsmiling and not sweet-spirited when they're around other people. It doesn't mean that they have to turn into an extrovert. It just means that no matter where you are, if you are walking with the Lord, and no matter what personality you feel you have, you can be sweet-spirited. You can put a smile on your face. You can greet people graciously no matter what. So be careful about that, guys.
Yeah.
Be careful about girls who are like,
good.
I'm just an introvert. That's why I don't smile at people.
Sure. And that label goes even beyond that, the introvert and extrovert thing. But some ladies, will say, well, I'm just a strong woman. That's why I just tell it like it is.
True.
And that's why I just can't find a man because I'm just a strong woman. And be careful about that label, because it ruins the beauty.
Yes.
And so let's move. We're going to run out of time here, but let's finish with the guys.
Okay.
Does she take initiative with an attitude of submission? And this was just such a tricky one.
I'm going to let you tiptoe around this one.
Well, I probably would not have said this one just because it's such a debatable topic, especially to singles.
Yes.
I wouldn't have said it, except when I was reading in Alistair Begg's book, one of the things he talked about was how important this is to marriage.
True.
And it's not something that starts when you say, I do. And what he was talking about there was that submission doesn't mean that she just sits and waits for her man to tell her what to do. Submission involves initiative and partnership and conversing and following. And it's a huge word that is vital to the success of a marriage in Christianity. And so he put it in such a good way, I thought. An attitude of submission is one that is not necessarily trying to run over people and always have her way and pout when she doesn't get her way, and fighting always for my right, my way. This is what I want. It's an attitude, but it's also that she takes initiative. She thinks things through. She's able to communicate with you. And this will come in hugely, guys, when you are raising a family or balancing a budget. Rather than you, God didn't put you as God's plan is not that you will be the man in charge and you have to make every decision. God puts you in a marriage relationship with His creation, and He created you on equal footing in Christ. There's neither male nor female. We're heirs together of the grace of life. And what it means is that a young man can partner with his wife, and she has the initiative to say, well, this is what the budgeted needs are, so how can we budget this?
Right.
They discuss everything from the budget. They discuss everything from raising children to what church we're going to attend, to how we're going to have family devotions, to the
Right.
meals. So she's very, even the Proverbs 31 lady took incredible initiative.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it. She was a valuable woman because of her response to her husband and her family, her
Right.
spirit, and her words.
Yes.
And her beauty was just really deep.
Yes.
And yet, at the same time, she showed incredible initiative in being a great blessing to the family because she jumped in, she partnered, she talked, she shared. And that is God's plan for submission
Right.
and leadership.
Yes.
So that's what we meant by that one. Would you add anything to that?
I would say just be very careful if she says, my daddy always lets me do what I want to do. My daddy gives me everything I want.
That would be a real problem.
Yes, that would be a red flag.
So we have 3 more here in
All right,
just
here we
about
go.
5 minutes. All right.
Okay.
So here's number 4.
Does she build your confidence by her behavior? What do you mean by that?
That's interesting, isn't it? The idea is that God designed most men with a need in their relationship to their wife to be edified and to be built.
Yes.
That's why he commands to the church at Ephesus that there should be reverence.
Yes.
A husband is to love his wife. He's to lead. Everything he does is based on an adoration and an endearment, a genuine, unconditional love for his wife that is sacrificial, that is giving. But then he closes it by reminding the ladies in the marriage, he said, to have respect and reverence for your husband. Respect,
Yes.
reverence. That's that word there.
Yes.
So what we mean here is that in the way that she responds, in the way that she speaks, does she build your confidence or does she tear you down?
Right.
And a young, what may be all of fun and games in a dating relationship as you're getting to know each other will have huge negative ramifications when you are committed in a marriage relationship.
True.
And 25 years of someone that always tears you down, always is negative, and her behavior is always belittling, is always
Right.
sarcastic, is a dangerous thing for a marriage.
Right. And it's not culturally popular for women to build men. It is let me say that again. Culturally popular for women to either shame men or make fun of men, and to certainly disrespect them. So you want to be careful about
So
that.
guys, what we're trying to show you single guys is just some ways you can say, is this relationship going to make a great marriage?
Yes.
And so there's 2 more. Does she display kindness that touches others? And that's a really big one because you often will quote to our daughters,
Yes.
in her tongue is the law of kindness.
Yes, and I will say, a gracious woman retaineth honor.
Yeah, and those verses in Proverbs are reminding us that kindness is essential in the relationships between guys and girls.
Yes.
And so, guys, as you're getting to know a young lady, one of the things you can look for is this kindness. Does it touch others? Is she kind to her family? Is she kind to her siblings? Is she kind to people she disagrees with?
Yes.
Is she kind when she doesn't get her way? Those are huge evaluations.
Yes.
And there's one more here. I like this last one.
Does she have a sense of humor in difficulties?
Now, here's something we got to tell you, guys. When you're in a relationship with you single guys, when you're dating a girl, this can be hard because typically in a dating relationship, we emphasize all the positives.
Yes.
We put our best foot forward in all of our relationship there. And sometimes we don't really see the difficulties necessarily. But what we mean by this one is take every chance to examine the difficult issues that come into a person's life. And they may be minuscule compared to, things that will happen later. Sometimes in a marriage relationship, and Beth and I have been through these, losing a baby is a difficult situation that you can experience till you're down the road some ways.
True.
Maybe even for many folks, the death of a parent occurs later in life.
True.
Or the loss of a job, or, a discovery of, I've got a disease. Those kind of difficulties you cannot necessarily evaluate. But you're looking just for small difficulties when they don't get their way. That's a difficulty. When something didn't work out that they wanted really badly, that's a difficulty.
Or they have a stressful day. I know sometimes people will joke about during getting ready for the wedding and actually the wedding day, they call the bride Bridezilla because she's so stressed out and then she takes it out on everyone around her. And I think probably probably there are signs of that before you get to the wedding day.
Yes.
So guys, be very careful. Is she high maintenance in stressful situations?
A merry heart does good like a medicine, the Bible says.
Yes.
And so having a sense of humor is huge in the difficulties of life. And when a person can go through life and kind of laugh, sometimes in difficulties, our worst self shows up, or life just hard. But when you can respond with a happy heart, that, all is well, and I don't like this, but, or maybe it's your own fault. I'm going through this difficulty because it was my fault. Like for instance, I mean, this is a silly difficulty, but let's say you're in a dating relationship and she's driving too fast and she gets pulled over and she gets a ticket. Can she have a sense of humor about that? Or is it like, oh my word, the stupid police officers in this town are always pulling me over for going 15 miles an hour over the speed limit? And is everything stupid and dumb? And can you believe they did that? And what in the world? And they always just mistreat me, and the people in this town are whatever.
Right.
And you can throw out all kinds of words at that point. You can say, they're racist, or they're bigots, or they're stupid, or you can throw out all kinds of words there. But a mature person, a spiritually mature, emotionally well person, can also have a sense of humor, and that's a wonderful trait to look for.
Yes.
So basically what we're talking about here is today just a single guys. We're not going to have time to cover the ladies today.
True.
But for you guys, you single guys, this is not every time you meet a girl, you go through this list. Well, what we want to say to you is, as you're getting to know, you're building a friendship with a young lady, you don't want to go into marriage blindsided and be like, oh my word, I didn't see this coming. God called us to enter into these relationships with wisdom, with discernment. And so there were 6 ways you can evaluate, where are we, and should we allow this to pursue toward the marriage altar?
Yes.
So any other thought before we close out?
Well, I would say probably after marriage, there are things that you're going to say, wow, didn't see that coming. Just because you're 2 sinners saved by grace living in the same house, and he's a guy and you're a girl. So what you want to do is get to know all that you can beforehand.
So we're out of time. We're out of time, or I would have been asking you. So what did you figure out that you didn't see coming?
Oh, well.
Maybe another podcast sometime.
There we go.
To share that. Well, thank you so much for listening today. We're talking to our single friends, and if you know a person you think would be helped by this, then I hope you'll share it, tell them about it, and certainly put into practice what you're learning.
Yes.
And until next week, have a great day. Ladies, next week is your week, and we'll see you then.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.